back in the day, we were the people that stood in line at a record store waiting for the gate to open, because the discovery of music was everything. For years, the only way you would be able to judge what you should get was you'd look at the cover and be like, oh, that's cool, that's gonna piss off my parents, or that looks rockin', or whatever. And it was all we looked forward to, was to open that cellophane and see what would fall out of the jacket. Sometimes there'd be a picture or something, and smell it and hold it, put it on the turntable, drop the needle. And when this music's in your blood, and Dio and the music he made's in your blood, it's just impossible to get out.
When you're a kid, you're looking for a voice, something that says, this is my generation. And for us, it was heavy metal. And then all of a sudden comes this dude with the most powerful voice of all.
With a heavy metal band, the music is so powerful and so potent, you really have to know how to control it. Specifically singers, because we have a message, we have things to say.
Listen to me and believe what I say.
He found a way to create music that makes people unable to contain themselves, to the point where they refuse to live without that music.
I was amazed by the way he was able to captivate people. I want to know how, why, how did you get there?
There are a lot of people that think of Ronnie as being the guy that did this and singing metal. That is him, but there's another side.
The million-dollar question, how would you describe Ronnie James Dio?
I tend to be an enigma to a lot of people, I think.
There was something about the guy. There was just something about him.
When Ronnie sang, he wanted to make sure that everyone never forgot it. People took it home with them, and they named their pet Dio, and they named their firstborn Ronnie. It was like, this is rock and roll that is gonna change your fucking life.
It's been years since Ronnie passed. He passed on the 16th of May, 2010. I think he's here. I think he's here still, all the time. Sometimes I hear my name called, but there's nobody here. I probably just imagine it.
Hello. Welcome to my home, and welcome to Behind Closed Doors. This was a Christmas present from my wife, from Wendy. We can see the lions and whatnot. Vic, away we go. I'm going to make this ball here, and then we can talk.
Okay. Ronnie's story traverses really the whole history of rock music. His career went on for decade after decade. Here we are all these years after he died, and he's still this huge figure in heavy metal. You know, some of these guys are immortal, but none more so than Ronnie James Dio.
We now have a media room here, but I still have the lions and I still have the nostalgia of when we used to have the pool table here.
Well, you've caught me in the library. One of my favorite places in all the world because it contains words.
You know, he had a message. He was a messenger. His message was for the people that lived regular lives, had regular dreams, that meant something real.
You know I don't play piano. I'm a singer. Let's go to the bar. It's my favorite place anyway.
This was his favorite place, was the bar. So I feel his presence much more here, and it's a warm, comforting feeling.
Obviously, you've had a lot of elbows resting on this at one time or another.
We never started with this. And why should we think that this should last forever? I was just as happy, and I'm sure Wendy was just as happy before, struggling and being happy together. I think this is all very transitory anyway. It's It comes and it goes. I mean, you have ups and downs. It's like life. Life goes through great waves of emotion and passion and great lows of despair and whatnot. That's the way life is.
There it is. That's his beautiful trumpet that hasn't been played in a long time. He used to play this from when he was 5 years old. He never played it for me. It's a beautiful thing, but he had had enough of it, I think, from all the hours of practice he had to do with his dad.
I started as a trumpet player when I was 5 years old.
Oh, so you've been very musical. Where
Yeah.
was that?
Upstate New York, a town called Cortland, New York, which is right in the middle of nowhere, dairy farming community, 18,000 people. It was a great place to grow up because you got good moral attitudes. You grew up well.
This is the house where Ronnie grew up. After he became famous, the city decided that they were going to name the street after him because it was on the corner of his house, so that this is the DIO way. This has been stolen a couple times. His immediate family, they were pretty straight-laced. His mother was, you know, a sweetheart, of course. You know, the moms were always easier on the kids than the father.
My father was harsh with me. You know, these were the days when a good hiding was, you know, right around the corner. And boy, believe me, I was always up for one of those. I wasn't up for it, but I always caused one of those, apparently. Everyone had the same ideas. There were good ethics, good morals, a lot of church involved. Whether I believed in it or didn't, it gave you rules.
You know, Catholic, you know. Ronnie was an altar boy.
Ronnie loved classical music. His father insisted he practice trumpet 3 hours every day, 4 years. He was a voracious reader.
Life began when I saw my first book. When I discovered that you could do things with words, man, I just freaked out. And I just read everything I could possibly find.
He was a smart kid in school. High grades, very intelligent, president of his class, actually.
And he was a little bit crazy. One time we were riding in the car, and there was a nun walking down the street, and Ronnie stuck his ass out the window and he mooned her. So he mooned the nun.
He was a bit of a rebel.
He had a gang called the Angels, stole a car here and there, and got in some trouble.
And it could have escalated, but I think not in that family background. I mean, it wasn't just his father, there was his grandmother, and there are pictures of her. She doesn't look like the kind of lady anybody would want to cross. I think for him, can you imagine in the 50s how conservative times were? Like most musicians, he realized music was a route out of that. This was a road to good times.
And what blows me away as a fan, when I discovered that Ronnie James Dio, best metal voice you ever heard, he was singing in the 50s, before the Beatles. How is that possible? Like, that's fascinating, other than wine and weed.
Everybody has their things. Some people like to go to football games. Some people like to bowl. I collect Ronnie James Dio. I was a radio guy, so I came out of Syracuse Radio in the early 60s. Ronnie first started his bands back in around 1958, playing trumpets and horns, and bass at the time.
It was earlier than the Beatles, so it was Bill Haley, it was Elvis Presley, it was all those rockers. That's what the inspiration was.
So Ronnie was born Ronald James Padavona. Back when he was in bands and stuff, it was too long a name and not hip enough for him.
Ronnie got his name Dio, famously, from a real-life mafia mob guy called Johnny Dio.
Ronnie was like, this is evil, but it's cool. And so he decided, that's going to be my name. And that was it.
I was the guy who didn't want to do anything but play the music. I didn't want to sing. When everyone tried and everyone kind of fell by the wayside, and they finally said, okay, it's your turn.
An angel is missing from heaven tonight.
training as a horn player was so absolutely perfect as a singer. You play from the same place as you sing from your diaphragm. In my mind, my voice was a trumpet.
In the Red Caps, Ronnie was so clean and could hit any note he was looking for. You could tell this guy is professional already, and he's only 18.
The Red Caps eventually became the Prophets, and through the years, the Prophets, they formed something special. He really had the passion to do the best he can with the abilities that he was God-given.
Ronnie had a dream, so we used to talk about that all the time. Ronnie was going to be the lead singer, star of the show, and then I was going to be his lead guitar player. Nicky was going to be the leader of any orchestration or the band.
Nick Pantus was Ronnie's kind of musical soulmate at that point, that he writes with, builds bands with, builds dreams with.
Even from those very, very early days, you can tell his mission in life was to be a singer. You can tell it.
One of the problems that we really had back then, we could not find the genre that would fit Ronnie perfectly.
He was capable of singing anything, basically. He would be doing songs by Engelbert Humperdinck, Tom Jones. Ronnie did a version of The Way of Love that Cher had a big hit on.
When you meet a boy.
Before Cher recorded it. It's phenomenal. I got in the band, I was just out of high school, 1965, 66. We had a manager at the time from Ithaca, and he was pushing Ronnie into following that Tom Jones route, you know.
The careers go in different directions. In those days, it wasn't fashionable to be a rock and roller or to want to pursue that as a career. It really made no sense at all to do. Well, I loved it so much that it was going to make sense for me to do.
All this series of pictures were taken in my parents' basement, and we took rolls of tinfoil and we hung it up in the back. And that's when the Beatles first came out, so everybody started to grow their hair long. We decided to change the name to the Electric Elves. I mean, we used to have a van that said Electric Elves on it. They thought we were electrical contractors. Yeah, my house needs wiring. Call the Electric Elves over. They're small, they can get into the crawl space real easily. You know, and at that time, playing clubs, you're doing cover songs. When a Beatles album came out, we learned the whole album, you know, because Ronnie could sing the whole album.
We were doing so well from a playing standpoint and, you know, going from Maine to North Carolina to Detroit. Wanted to be better musically and wanted to be something special.
In 1968, I had been out of the band for a while, and Ronnie was playing clubs like they were always playing clubs, and they were called the Electric Elves.
We played in, I think it was Waterbury, Connecticut for a week. And we decided not to stay overnight the last night because our gear was in the back of the van. We all rode in the van. So we decided to drive home that night rather than stay another night. And a drunk driver ends up crossing the lane and hits us head on. I woke up in a hospital bed with Ronnie next to me in the other bed. We looked like zombies. Ronnie hit the windshield. His whole scalp was torn back. He had over 100 stitches in his scalp.
Nicky was driving, and it impacted the front, pinned him in the steering wheel, and he actually bled to death. And it was really hard to believe, to understand that that could happen.
This is such a catastrophe, not just for, obviously, for Nick and his family, but for Ronnie, it becomes a moment of, is this time to throw in the towel? Is this a sign? Is this just not meant to be?
That's a slide. That's one slide of Ronnie's. You can see it's after the accident when his hair was just starting to grow in. Ronnie, when he was a kid, succeeded really greatly as far as academics. At some point, he started college and he was taking pharmacy. So after the accident, he could have chosen anything, any avenue to go to. I remember the moment when I said, we're gonna put this thing back together. I said, yeah, we're gonna put this thing back together. In our minds, we were wanting to go to Led Zeppelin, The Who. We idolized Deep Purple. Deep Purple, that's what was the heaviest, you know? And we just said, okay, that's what we want to do.
And the death of Nick Pantus, that terrible crash that could have easily dissuaded lesser men just to say, you know what, I'm done. Ronnie decides, no, I'm not done. In fact, I'm only just getting started. He decides to build this into something more contemporary with, you know, a shit ton of power.
There's just a power and a presence that's remarkable when you think that a man of such small stature had the biggest voice you're ever going to hear.
Eventually, we became Elf. We were very small. We had all kinds of hair and beard and the whole deal. We walk out on stage and actually people started to chuckle. But when we hit the first note, it was like jaws dropped, you know?
And suddenly, you've got not just a new band, but a new sound, a new attitude, and the beginnings of the Ronnie James DIO that would become famous.
We came up with those songs, and that's what ended up getting us an audition with, you know, Columbia.
Elf were auditioning for the famous Clive Davis, who discovered everybody, just everybody, and we were going to audition for him. Wow.
At the time, Roger Glover and Ian Pace from Deep Purple, out of the blue, for some reason, they wanted to become producers. So somehow they got involved in coming to this audition.
We were told just at the last moment that Roger and Ian were coming. Well, that put us in quite a turmoil because two of our heroes, my Lord.
Oh my God, like, you know, two people from Deep Purple are gonna be here, and, you know, it's like, and I idolized the band, you know. Some chairs set up, and Clive comes in, and a couple people with him, and then Roger and Ian come in.
Well. There were probably, I don't know, 15 or 20 suits in the room. You know, Clive Davis, etc., all these people, and white wine, and, you know, oh, thank you very much. And then these four midgets walked out. And I go, what's this, a circus act or something, you know?
Standing there and playing in front of, like, you know, record executives, and not to mention two guys in Deep Purple, and you have to try to sell yourself. It was like a big deal. You know, we played the songs, and it was like, all right, that's enough. We don't need to hear any more songs. And everybody gets up. You know, we couldn't hear what they were talking about. And everybody leaves. We don't know if they hated it or if they loved it.
I mean, we were knocked out. Absolutely knocked out. And we said, yeah, we'll do this. We'll do this. And we flew down to Atlanta and recorded the album.
Then we got to go on tour with Deep Purple. So we went from playing bars to playing arenas. You really felt like we made it at that time, you know. Little to know that there's a long way to go before you really make it.
I always had places that I wanted to get to. Deep Purple were my favorite band. We must have done probably 8 full tours with the band. So Elf took upon the world. You know, that was the beginning, certainly for me.
So Over the course of the next couple of years touring, Ronnie was always around us. I fell in love with the sound of his voice, then I fell in love with his personality, then I fell in love with him as a human being.
He was great. He was funny, strong-willed, and he believed in what he did. Go for what you believe in, and that's what Ronnie was. He was a hard fist coming at you.
You know, I just loved the guy. I just genuinely loved him. He was born into him from generations of eons of lifetimes ago to be kind.
Growing up a Deep Purple fan, it's just like they were the biggest and the fucking baddest of all the musicians on the planet. And fucking Blackmore. Oh my fucking God.
Ritchie Blackmore, he's like the Deep in Deep Purple. He's a mystery within a riddle. He's not the easiest man to get on with.
I barely saw Ritchie in Deep Purple when I was in the band. Ritchie was an isolator. And this is in the days where there was no separate dressing rooms. Well, he had his own dressing room. He stayed at different hotels, basically. And he never partook in any group endeavors. No after-dinner parties, no.
Blackmore left Purple because they were going in a more funk direction.
I was going to leave Deep Purple no matter what because I didn't respect that type of music that we were getting into. But luckily, at the same time, I met Ronnie.
Ritchie and I really had the same kind of musical feelings. We were engrossed in classical kind of music, Bach especially. And we felt that there was a great place in music to kind of revive that mystical, magical aura and put it into today's kind of context.
Ritchie left and went to start, you know, putting Rainbow together with the guys in Elf, you know, pretty much, you know.
By the time Rainbow gets going, you've got the Mount Rushmore of heavy rock, Purple, Sabbath, Zeppelin. All of them shared a common denominator in the sense that they were all coming from the blues. Ronnie James Dio and Ritchie Blackmore wanted to explore this kind of neoclassical heavy rock music that is something way beyond. So Rainbow is taking this spaceship to a new place.
As a teenager, I came from an abusive family, physically and verbally abusive, in and out of hospitals and stitches and surgeries. So music was extremely important to me because I had no one. I remember I was in a car. Deep Purple had just broken up. Disco was starting to make its scene. The world was upside down. And all of a sudden, Man on the Silver Mountain comes on the radio. And I was like, yeah, you know, you're just all fired up. Ritchie Blackmore was back. Then I first heard Ronnie James Dio's voice. And I was like, who the hell is that? He was like a whole universe that was concealed within one man. And so at one point, the world was upside down and it turned it right side up again.
This is not just another rock band. It's going to take what we used to call heavy rock into a whole vista that really hasn't existed before. And it was all about this dynamic between this incredible guitarist and this extraordinary singer that almost everybody had never heard of.
I remember going to Munich to do an album, and Ritchie was in the same studio. And he said, oh, I got to play you a song, Stargazer. Full blast. I was blown away. That was like a masterpiece.
Ronnie sang about mystical, magical stars and universe and dreams.
That's what I do with my music. I'm a narrator. I give people avenues which they can go down, safe avenues. I don't shove it down their throats. They're your dreams to try to attain. I don't tell them this is what they must do. So a narrator is what I am.
In the Runaways days, I would put on Stargazer. All my dreams and all my hopes would come out. That gave me all the strength and all the power I ever needed in guitar playing and music and just my everyday shit.
Even though Ronnie could really sing blues if he wanted to, lyrically, he was never the victim in his lyrics. It was more of a sage.
You can see, but you're blind. Someone turn the sun around. But you can see in your mind the gates of Babylon.
And the things we wrote were sort of different. That was the band I wanted to be in forever. That was my chance to do what I was born to do, which was to write classically oriented fantasy kind of music.
Ronnie was now firmly embedded into the gothic and medieval rock of Rainbow. He'd found his niche, he'd found his new character.
Well, here we are at the famous Rainbow Bar and Grill, land of fruits and nuts. And they always used to say that, move in, and it still is the place to be on Sunset Strip. I came to Los Angeles in around '74. I got a job in a diner, and then I was doing a little bit of acting. I didn't mean to do acting, actually. I went with a girlfriend of mine, and we went there as stand-in, what do you call it? Extras? Extras, yeah, we went in as extras. It was a movie called Death Race 2000, and this guy that I had to rub his shoulders and stuff, he was telling me that he had written a movie and it was going to be a big time, and I thought, yeah, right, whatever. And it actually turned out to be Sylvester Stallone.
You schmuck.
And then I met a girl at a party, and she said, well, why don't you get a job at the Rainbow? We had everyone in here. Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, The Who, anyone you could possibly think of was in here. So this is the table where it all happened. This is where I met Ronnie with Richie, and he introduced me to Ronnie and invited me to go to a party afterwards up at their house. And so I went up there. We talked and followed me around a lot. I said, he's too short for me. But then he talked to me more, and we talked on the phone. And Ronnie, being Ronnie, is a very personal person. He was so interesting and such a very wonderful person who loved animals, as I did, loved to talk about books, movies, everything. I think I fell in love with his brain, actually, and the way he was, his graciousness.
You felt the same way.
And then he went on tour with Rainbow. And then he asked me to go on the road with him, and I'd only known him for a few weeks. And I said, no, I can't quit my job. I'll come for a couple of days. Which ended up being a couple of months, which ended up being for the rest of my life. We were both young, and we were experienced in the road, and it was fun for a while. And then it got a little bit tense.
Rainbow are enormous in Japan. Rainbow are bigger in Japan than the Stones. Rainbow are huge in Britain and Europe. Rainbow are not huge in America.
In America, Rainbow never got there with Ronnie as the singer. And I know that bothered Blackmore tremendously, and he was consumed with getting Rainbow on US radio.
Long Live Rock and Roll was the last Rainbow album. They're working on the next one, early stages. Richie decided it was time to get a hit.
I was staying at Bruce's house one day, and he played me a song, Since You've Been Gone. He said, well, Richie wants to do it. I said, get out of here. After what he's done, especially with Rainbow Rising, how could he want to do this?
It was, other people breathing into his ear that the material that we were writing was too fantastical. He said, you think maybe you should try to write some songs more about relationships? And I said, no, I wasn't going to write love songs.
Ronnie spent, the first 10, 15 years of his career putting on a suit, looking for the hit song. This is something he'd left behind many years ago and believed that the unique selling point of Rainbow had nothing to do with Since You've Been Gone, Baby. And Ronnie spoke up.
He stayed true to himself, and I think it really pissed off a few people.
It got very tense, and so Ronnie was actually fired.
Since you've been gone, since you've been gone, I'm out of my head, can't take it.
That was the time where Rainbow did get airplay. In America, it wasn't with Ronnie.
For Ronnie, on a personal level, it was a disaster. He and Wendy were in a situation where the house they lived in, was owned by the band. Ronnie didn't even see any royalties from it. This is a guy who co-wrote all the big songs. Ronnie didn't get any royalties from Rainbow until after he died. So they had no money. Ronnie was a very, very proud man. He didn't want to admit that he'd been hurt by this. He didn't want to admit that maybe he'd blown it.
I was a young Sabbath fan. I remember watching Don Kirshner's rock concert, seeing them do Never Say Die live without lip syncing. You could tell that Ozzy was sounding a little rough and kind of just doing that penguin clap, just running around and just looked like a wind-up toy after a while.
Black Sabbath is pretty much yesterday's news in the late 70s. The original Black Sabbath is some of the greatest metal ever made. No one was disputing that. But at that point, 10 years into the business, coming off of a couple lackluster records, beat up from the road, it was a mess at that time.
Things weren't working out at the end of the 70s for us.
I think it was probably a lot of different things. Disarray, maybe disillusionment might be a better word. We'd been in rock and roll for years, man.
All of them were very badly riddled with drug problems. Ozzy was considered like a huge mess and can't sing and can't write, can't do this.
He was just a crazy dude from Birmingham, like a juvenile delinquent. Was never a professional, and that's what was great about him.
And Ozzy's a sweetheart, we all know that. But he was crazy in the 70s. I mean, one night at the Rainbow, he set himself on fire at a booth in the Rainbow. Fire extinguisher came out, he could have fucking died. He was laughing his ass off. And Oz, he came to such a place that he needed to leave.
Ozzy leaves, and everybody was just like, okay, so that's it. They're done. Black Sabbath is just done.
So by the end of the 70s, Ronnie and Wendy take off for LA. Ronnie would not go down the, hey baby, let's have a hit route. He's already in his 30s. He's already been around the block a zillion times. He's got no career. I mean, what the fuck am I going to do? But the Rainbow, which seems to have been such a lucky place for him, he meets Wendy in the Rainbow. And now who does he meet in the Rainbow one night? Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath. Tony Iommi from Black Sabbath, who has just sacked Ozzy.
At the Rainbow Bar and Grill, I met Tony. Saw him that night, went to their rehearsal place. I only went up there just to say hello.
He came over to the house and I played him a bit of the stuff, some of the riffs I'd got. And he said, oh, let me have a go at that.
Went off the other room and wrote the beginning and a verse to a song called Children of the Sea.
He'd walk out and just sing, you know, this voice had come out. I mean, he was just, you know, unbelievable.
When he first got offered the job in Black Sabbath, he was like, I don't know if I like this music or not. And I said, we have $800 left in the bank. You love this music. And so he joined the band and he did love the music.
This was going into a band that, to me, had been the heavy metal band. A band that didn't apologize for coming to town. It just stepped on buildings when it came to town. And to be included in that band was very special to me.
Taking over for Ozzy in Sabbath. Can you imagine the pressure?
To replace a singer's really, you can go either way. And then putting Ronnie in a tough spot, really.
You know, again, I'm a very positive person. I said, they're never going to say anything bad about you. They're only going to say something bad about the new guy who came in. And my shoulders are big enough to take it. So you know what we'll do? We're going to write some great songs. Don't worry about it, man. I'll take care of it.
At this point, I'm working for the biggest rock and heavy metal PR company in the UK. Suddenly it comes round, Sabbath have sacked Ozzy, but they're going to bring Ronnie James Dio in. And there was a lot of blowback. Where's Ozzy? This guy can't be Ozzy. From the outside looking in. It doesn't sound promising. It does not sound promising.
They had to rise above and create an album that was far above anything that they had done in the past.
You could think it's good, you could think it's bad, but you don't know till the audience, the fans, they're going to tell you if it's good or not.
As a fan, you're established to the singer, the drummer, the guitar player, whoever. That's the band. And if there's something that's different, what's going on, you know? Is it even going to work? Is it even going to connect?
Now, of course, there's always going to be a lot of, like, die-hard Sabbath followers that are like, no, there's only one singer of Black Sabbath. And then all of a sudden, here comes Ronnie James Dio.
I think it's a creation that happened many realms ago, that Ronnie would be the singer in Sabbath. It's all been written in stone. He was supposed to be there. He was supposed to replace Ozzy. He was supposed to take that microphone. He was supposed to write him.
This is Ronnie's very iconic white blouse. He wore this when he was the first round of Black Sabbath in the 80s. He loved this shirt. He always loved these sleeves, these medieval sleeves.
Going into Sabbath with the sleeves and the drama. He was able to captivate people with an amazing presence.
Well, yeah, it did become more mystical, and we built up the stage show basically around the image of he had got this theatrical way about him.
I was always a little bit intimidated by Ronnie because of not only his voice, but everything else around him. He projected something, you know, oh my God, there's Dio. But on those occasions that we did get a chance to sit and talk, he was just a very comforting, welcoming kind of a guy in every aspect.
Every time I was with him, we'd laugh. We would laugh our asses off. Clownish behaviour, boyish, you know. And that behaviour was very rampant. He was just Ronnie, he was just mellow, but when he sang, he became the character. Because Dio, not Ronnie and Ronnie James, Dio was a huge character.
Ozzy Osbourne, obviously, who was there before me, was throwing the peace sign around everywhere. And it felt something else was, you know, was needed to incorporate me into my own thing with that band.
You know, I worked with Dio in Sabbath as his publicist, and I'll never forget this. Ronnie said, I thought about this thing, and I think it could be a bridge between Ozzy and me. And he said, what do you think of this? I said, what's that? He goes, I'm thinking it's like Ozzy, the spirit of Ozzy is still here. This is still Black Sabbath, but it's me now. I went, that's brilliant.
It was iconic as soon as you saw it. Even if you didn't know what it meant, it was iconic. What's he doing?
It became a trademark for him, you know, to do that. And the fans, you know, attached to that. Now, in a situation what's not even involving metal, you see crowds, they're like, ah.
I mean, even today, go on Facebook, and there's all these kind of middle-aged women going.
When you see somebody do that, you know where it came from, you know, who originated that.
People think this means something other than what it really is. If you'd all join us, we'll tell you what it means.
Ronnie had always, when he'd grown up in the Italian family, of course, would walk around with his grandmother, and his grandmother was very superstitious, and she would walk around going like this to ward off evil or give the evil eye or ward the evil eye off, which is called the Maloik.
So this, what we now call the devil horns, that is Ronnie James Dio, and it was something his fierce-looking grandmother used to do.
It means long live rock and roll. Put him up!
And suddenly, by the end of every show, the whole audience is doing it back. And again, that was another one of those moments I thought, this is interesting shit here, you know? This is really interesting. He's going to work this until it is just his band. And that's exactly what he did.
So come with me, I'll give you desire. But first, you're gonna burn in fire!
The rest, as they say, is history. I mean, I'm not the only person who's ever used it, of course, but, you know, I must say that I've been the one who's used it most and probably am most known for it now. It's only meant as a, you know, a connection between the music that we play, which is hard and heavy and, you know, pretty damn evil. So that's what that's all about, anyway.
The whole thing was difficult for me, and Ronnie knew that I was feeling uncomfortable with certain things. I really missed Ars. I felt like I'd lost a best friend, and so I was grieving that. And my drinking had accelerated, and that plays a huge part in my departure from Black Sabbath. But Ronnie was supportive towards me as a person throughout.
So that's how I first met Ronnie, and we hit it off right away because he's from upstate New York, Cortland, and I'm from Brooklyn, New York. And Tony and Geezer, I couldn't understand them very well. I was pretty young, and they were kind of scary looking with the mustaches and you know, these are the guys. And they talk to me, and I go, Ronnie, what did they say? I keep asking Ronnie, what did he say? What does that mean? Blimey?
So Sabbath follows Heaven and Hell with Mob Rules. Mob Rules is an unbelievable record.
Sign of the Southern Cross. Look at my arms. Just saying the name of the song does this to me.
We've heard so many rumors about splits, even now, in that Black Sabbath have got people coming and going.
I'm sure it looks as though it's one of those who's going to be next situations, but it's only...
It does seem to be.
Sure.
Is it a happy band and a permanent band?
Yes, it is.
We finished the Mob Rules. The tour was fantastic, so everything's going great. Then, I don't know what happened, but it's business between those guys, three of them.
A lot of times success breeds problems, and that happened. I felt that really did happen, that all of the bad things that could be used were used, you know, from drug abuse to mental abuse.
I'm not sure what happened. It was, I mean, we were all doing quite a bit of nose powder at the time.
This is the era of cocaine. Everybody in the music business is doing too much cocaine, but not at all Ronnie Dio. That was, it was never his thing. And they clashed.
We got to the point where I think jealousy crept in because I was getting a lot more of the notice. Hey, I was a singer, for God's sake, you know? Sorry. So much jealousy, I don't want to say this. When you get to that point where people see your face and your name in front of it too much, it becomes, why is that happening?
It got difficult for him behind the scenes. Egos getting involved.
We recorded a Live Evil album, and the mixing of that record became a problem.
When we were doing the live album, he did get sort of upset about things.
Ronnie could be fierce, very fierce. He cared about every single detail.
I've heard a lot of rumors, you know, that I'm a control freak, and you know that, of course, led to. I think we should let Tony mix this album. In other words, your services are not required anymore.
Dio joined the band and turned it into something incredible. But don't forget, Tony's still thinking, yeah, but I built this band for 10 years before you came along and I offered you the gig. Another gram of coke and it gets even worse than that. 2 more grams and I don't even know who the fuck you are. Why don't you fuck off and back where you came from?
It just got to the point where Ronnie wasn't happy anymore. It was his choice to leave, and he left.
He had been through Rainbow, and even when he found the sweet smell of success, it turned sour so quick. And then he does it again with Sabbath, and it turns sour so quick.
You know, it was a very traumatic time for me. You know, you don't go from being, you know, one of the biggest bands in the world to not having a job anymore. And what do? To me, it's always what comes next and what your ideas are, how many chances you want to take. I had no one, you know, and so I thought, well, better get off your ass and go out and start writing songs on your own. We had a garage in the back, and off the side of the garage was this tiny little shed kind of thing. And so I went in there and put the Radio Shack and bought all these little boxes and plugged things into my little reel-to-reel tape recorder. And that sounds so terrible, but you know, I loved it. I went out in that horrible little place that I set up, this little room, and went, wow, I can do this. And so for me, it was like a real genesis.
I was a wife then, I wasn't a manager. And then he said, okay, so now you're managing me. Well, this is like, well, wait a minute. I manage your affairs, but I don't know about managing a band. But I figured if he's got confidence in me, then I'll do the best I can. In fact, I think it was Richie said, you know, she just wants to make him a star. Yeah, I did. Yeah, that was my goal.
One night, Ronnie goes, look, I'm gonna put my own band together, you wanna join me? And I went, wow, yeah. When we put it together, it was just me and him. He's playing bass. We played Holy Diver. Boom, 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 boom.
Ronnie had written a bunch of material, and they begin the search for the hotshot guitar player, which everybody had to have at that time.
So we went to London. Vinny and I went, going around to clubs.
Here's a band playing, let's go see them. We went to all these different clubs.
And I knew the kind of player I wanted. I didn't like the style of playing the American guitar players were using at the time. They all wanted to be as fast as Eddie Van Halen. I mean, after having played with Tony and with Richie, I wanted someone who could be fast, but had to have romance in his soul. I said, you know, I'm gonna give Jimmy a call, Jimmy Bain, because of course Jimmy had played with me in Rainbow, and I thought, who better to know guitar players than Jimmy? So the call was only to ask him to be new guitar players.
Jimmy just assumed that he was going to be the bass player. So he was.
And Jimmy called this guitar player's house at 2 in the morning, and a young shredder from Ireland, this guy, Vivian Campbell. And the thing that sold Ronnie, we were jamming, and then Viv was all out of things to play. So he played like a Chuck Berry thing, just in this little section. That was it.
The missing ingredient was Vivian Campbell, the guitar hero. So now we've become a family and a band, DIO.
These are tapes that I found that are from the beginning. You know, I haven't heard this stuff. Jam. Let's see what's on here. Jam. So we needed a place to rehearse, so Ronnie got this place called Sound City. It was like every night at 7 o'clock going to the boys' club. They let us do anything there. They had candy machines. We'd go, you want some candy? He goes, yeah. Boom, 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 until all the candy fell out. You know, pinball games. We got to make little ramps so you never lost a ball. Have some drinks and smoke some pot. And we were playing. Life was fantastic. But he's singing that in the room. You go, holy shit.
What was it feeling like with the band back then? Oh, it was great. It was such a wonderful family atmosphere. Just that magical situation where everybody loved being in that room and playing, and we experimented.
So this one's a version of Rainbow in the Dark. There's no keyboard part in it. Ronnie's still testing the waters where the vocals should go. We had Rainbow in the Dark. We're playing it back, and Jimmy's got a cigarette in his mouth with a big ash ready to fall, and a Jim Beam and Coke. And he goes over to this little shitty keyboard of Ronnie's, and he goes, and he wrote that part without the ash falling. That's killer, dude.
Rainbow in the Dark, it's a song that I really disliked. And when it was finished, I announced to everyone that I was going to take a razor blade and just cut the tape up. And so I went for the razor blade, and I went, no, don't. And I didn't do that, and I thank them over and over and over. So, you know, kudos to them forever and ever.
We were just having time of our life. And the roadies used to go, this is going platinum, dude. Nah, never.
At that time, you had the vinyl records. So on the first Holy Diver, we both wanted to push the edges, and the record company were not that happy about it. But we've got this idea, and we know what we want.
In the 80s, I was working with Ronnie and Wendy on pictures and just in general doing stuff that they wanted me to do and everything. I get a phone call from this guy named Gene Hunter. He says, Wendy gave me your phone number, and do you know of a good cove to go to? I said, cove? We ended up down at a place called Paradise Cove. So we get down there, and he's got this wetsuit because it's really cold, and on the top is a priest outfit, and he's got a shitload of chains, a lot of chains. I'm going, what's he doing? So he found a spot, and he's trying to drag these chains into this middle of this little cove. It looked like he was standing on a slippery rock or something, but he kept bobbing up and down. I'm not taking pictures. He said, take the fucking pictures. Take pictures. 'Cause he's bobbing and going up and down. So I'm taking and snap, snap, snap. Are you all right? Are you coming back up? Oh, crap. Are you okay? Take the picture. So he's, I don't know if I took more than a roll and a half before it's like, this is not good. This is now bad, because it's like he's trying to breathe. And he's trying to throw me the chain to bring him in, but he can't lift it. So I'm slipping, he's drowning or falling and going under again, and it's like, so somehow I yank him, he pulls, and he gets up. He's like half drowned. I got the pictures developed, and I turned them over to him, and he said, I'm working on the cover for this Holy Diver record. So after the record came out, I'm like, that's what we were doing.
Rainbow in the Dark is up.
It was just crazy. You could feel it, the excitement.
The radio stations here was playing the shit out of that first record. And you just heard it every 10 minutes.
We did Santa Monica Civic, sold out in, I think, in an hour. And then they did an in-store after that where they smashed through the window. There were so many fans.
I think because of the introduction of a new band just under Ronnie's name with a new young hotshot guitar player, DIO, the band, it was an introduction for him to a whole new world, a whole new start for him in this rising scene at the time of heavy metal.
This is where we'd always sit, and there's pictures of Ronnie and Rainbow there. Oh, how young we were. So young, baby face. They're all baby faces. Oh.
There are some of these songs that I think reflect my own trauma at the time as well. I mean, you know, I had some personal things that were going on that bothered me quite a bit.
Yeah, in the beginning, it was like a normal relationship. Everything was hunky-dory, you know, and then things changed between Wendy and Ronnie, you know.
You know, obviously, it's very hard being married to a musician for a start, and managing him as well is very hard. Ronnie was a wonderful, sweet, loving, giving person, but he was a perfectionist. He had dreams, and he was going to fulfill them. And if you weren't up to his standard, you wouldn't get it. He would give it to his crew, his band, to me. So we had a lot of fights, a lot of, I'll leave for a while, I'll come back for a while, back and forth during our relationship.
You know, the relationship was unique, let's face it. It wasn't traditional by any means. It wasn't just an artist-manager relationship, and it wasn't just a husband and wife relationship. It was a lot of very complex things.
Any relationship has ups and downs, and we have many ups and downs, but we were always a team. I had his back, he had my back, so we were going to fight to the end together.
In the early 80s, Los Angeles was just the most exciting place on earth.
Early 80s were badass. I mean, they were badass.
It was magic. All of a sudden, the Strip came alive.
Rock bands everywhere, and there was parties every night, but everybody was into music. Everybody was also kind of into recreational things that perhaps weren't as healthy for you. Most of all, there was just all this great rock music and all these great bands, and my distinct memory is Ronnie kind of being in the center of all that, you know.
He fit in a different way.
Ronnie wasn't a guy that was like, hey, let's go out and chase chicks, you know? Always the conversation seemed to go to the same thing, music.
I think he acted more like a role model.
There was this whole undercurrent of metal bands around LA that looked up to him, and he was aware of that, and he was very nurturing to everybody. Are you doing your best? Are you doing the greatest thing you could possibly doing?
Globally, metal was thriving, was getting on the radio, it was selling, and it's getting introduced to a lot of people on what was a new thing at the time called MTV.
The advantages of the MTV video explosion, you can't understate it really, because it had a lot of value.
When I was in Quiet Riot, Come On Feel the Noise was on every half hour. It's timing. Ronnie had just put together the DIO band, and all of a sudden he's getting the MTV exposure.
Rainbow in the Dark became the one that MTV played all the time. Ronnie loved that one because it made him look really tall.
Him in the white boots on the roof, walking around. I was like, I want white boots like that.
Record companies would dump all this money into the music videos. I mean, now if you had to look back, you could probably do something way better with your cell phone. It's true.
So he was at the forefront of that, but he looked mean, you know, he looked tough.
He was one of the very few artists that actually had that metal image going.
You know, look at Doc and Breaking the Chains. They got me chained down in a kimono, and I'm like, oh boy. And then you cut to Dio, that was a totally different vibe.
Ronnie was pretty much all about just going out there and being as metal as you could ever be.
I got this mysterious phone call from these producers that wanted me to come over to Warner Brothers. They told me that they had had great success with Holy Diver, and they wanted to do something epic to launch The Last in Line. So Jeff, the Warner Brothers executive, popped a cassette in, kind of going, oh, this is kind of cool. And there's this moment in that song where we are coming, and then Ronnie uncorks his amazing voice, and I'm not going to try to even imitate it. You know, a chill goes down my spine, and I thought, okay, there could be a video of this song. Jeff pitched me an idea. He wanted to have a video about teenagers in hell. So the studio wants to do a video about teenagers in hell. And Ronnie had a much more philosophic take on it. And he basically told me, well, from birth to death, we're all in a line. And imagine if you're the last in line. And then he says, and of course you've got to put Murray in it. Murray? Who's Murray?
Well, Murray, you'd think his name would be Damien or fucking Lucifer. Ronnie one day said Murray, so he became Murray.
And so I basically came up with this slightly wonky idea, which is about a, normal teenage kid. He's, going around. He's got his delivery, and he goes into the elevator, and he pushes the button. And I kind of took the Wizard of Oz motif of, being swept up in a tornado and inverted it. I got the teenagers in hell, and I got the line, and Murray in the distance.
All the elements of Ronnie's career seem to come together with Dio. The culmination of his extraordinary presence, an extraordinary ability to write songs. They weren't top 40 songs, but the key factor is that he knew how to connect. That was the key, that very direct connection with his audience, which fans felt.
Is that good? Is that in focus? You got that shit? I got it. Where I really came online as a metalhead, 80s, that period was real, like, devil heavy.
Faceless creatures in robes, from my study, symbolize druids, which, of course, go back to Satan worship.
It was Satan. There was something extra seductive and powerful about that. Looking back on it now, there is some humor.
All right, now you're
listen
going
very
to
hard.
play this backwards.
Right, and then you'll hear there's power in Satan.
Did y'all hear that?
My mom was a little concerned with my consumption of devil music. And she gave me this tape that was a preacher who was talking about evil music.
Daily, young people are bombarded by distorted visual images and twisted music messages.
It was supposed to, like, turn me away from the evil ways, but I was like, oh. It was just sort of this rad tape that turned me on to new music that I hadn't listened to before. It had the opposite of effect of what it was supposed to do. Dio had some devil. Dio's devil was a little more theatrical, like a Shakespearean devil. It's the thing that makes all great stories interesting. It's like, how good is your villain? What's Star Wars without Darth Vader? How good is the Bible without the devil? Dude, no spice.
There was blowback of people thinking, oh, he's just some sort of demonic guy.
I'm sure the evangelical church, for instance, in the States, isn't too happy about what you do.
Not too pleased, no. Well, they think that I'm the devil, or this particular sign means putting a curse on you.
And what does that sign mean with two fingers?
Oh, I just cursed you, and you're going to die in hell.
Well, there's a myth that the DIO logo says devil when turned upside down. That's not true at all. Not at all.
Christians ruin everything. I'm an ordained minister, I believe in God and Jesus and all that stuff. They just ruin everything. They're idiots. He wanted to be dark. He wanted to be scary. He wanted to be powerful. He wanted to be intense. For Ronnie, it was a tool. He knew how to communicate.
I don't believe in either heaven and hell as a place to go to. At the end of the day, if we all just believe in the same thing, that we got a choice between good and evil. Hey, make your choice. That's all it's about to me.
We pray to someone, but when it's said and done, it's really all the same, with just a different name.
The whole good and evil thing, it came from a very deep place within him where he wanted to empower people. He authentically believed that the weaker guy needs to stand up for himself.
You can accomplish anything without people influencing you to do stuff that you don't want to do. As a kid, I just remember how strong and resonant and powerful it was.
always felt to be somewhat of a spokesman for people who are maybe lonely, maybe have been looked down upon.
His heart was for the downtrodden and the black sheep of the globe. He was our voice because that's how he saw himself.
Climb the rainbow! You're a star! We are forever, you and I! We stars!
At the time, they were doing We Are the World. Ronnie had wanted to be part of that, but we were nasty, heavy metal, dirty people.
We are fire and stone, and we all want to touch a rainbow!
You know, often metal is marginalized and thought of as lowbrow or whatever. So many times those artists are not invited to the charity events and the charity recordings. So Ronnie decided to do his own heavy metal We Are the World, and it was awesome.
This project came about because of a radiothon that the station KLOS held for 2 days. Our bass player, Jimmy Bain, and the guitar player, Vivian Campbell, noticed the lack of people representing our genre of music, our kind of stuff.
Ronnie just wanted to show that we want to help too, but do something that's a little bit different.
Every single musician that made it in the 80s, you know, we grew up listening to Ronnie. So anytime Ronnie would say, listen, I need you guys, we would say, yes, we're there. Because we wanted to be like him. He was a hero to all of us.
You can think about anybody who was anybody on top at that time, and they were there.
Do you know a lot of the people involved here today?
Well, I'm meeting them out there, aren't I? I met the Yngwie Malmsteen person, you know. He's great. I like the way he puts Yngwie J. Malmsteen on his album, so you don't confuse him with all the other Yngwie Malmsteens in the business.
You've got all of these people. We all know about each other and what we're famous for doing and not doing. Ronnie was the captain of the ship, and he steered us through what could have been an absolute catastrophe.
You can do it better than it.
Yeah. Everybody's giving 1,000%. You know, you can't, just a couple of notes. You can't do that because there's Ronnie Dio and he's the boss.
And I have to say, I admit it, you know, I was scared shitless. I'm like, I'm playing with Ronnie James Dio.
Shit. Does Dockin really rhyme with rockin'? Is what I need to know. There's some debate in here, but we'll sort that out later. Okay, here we go.
I'm just nervous, man. Fucking Ronnie James Dio producing, I'll stand out here. God damn. Never in my wildest dreams would I thought this would ever happen to me.
Good man. Great. Right. Nice job. Proud of you.
Mark, we should have. We're gonna put
Rhymes
some
with
money.
rockin'.
The Hearing Aid song is about 8 minutes long in its full-length version, and I think about 6.5 of those minutes are guitar soloing, going back and forth, because there's about 15 players taking different sections. But I don't know. I mean, I'm such a fan that I love every note of it. I'm totally down with it to this day. And I love that it showed that just because you're into metal, it doesn't mean you're a moron. You can still have social issues. You can still care about things. You can still care about people.
After you stop listening to this record, to what I say, people will still be starving, and only you can change it. So if this is the vehicle to make you think, and to make you help another human being, then so be it. We've done our part.
We actually made, I know it was like over $1 million that we got to send to Africa.
It's easy to look back on that stuff with a snicker now, but at that time, that was the coolest thing in the world.
You know, I can't even name all the rock stars that are in that video. Rock and roll was king. MTV was king. This was our prime.
Hello, I'm Ronnie James Dio. We're about to embark on our Sacred Heart Tour. It's a show that we feel is the most spectacular that we've ever produced. When we get to your town, we're hoping to transport you back to the days of knights and dragons, damsels in distress, crystal balls, and lots of magic. We think we've got a great show for you. We hope to see all of you really soon.
The original Dio band made a third record called Sacred Heart, and the music videos got bigger, the stage show got bigger.
He knew how to dream, make that dream materialize, and it just kept growing and growing and growing.
He wanted a bigger stage set and bigger and more, and it cost a fortune, but he wanted it. We had this huge 18-foot fire-breathing dragon with lasers.
Yeah, this thing about dragons, you know, dragons and rainbows, what a great thing. You know, I've got leather studs and whips and chains, and Ronnie's got dragons and rainbows. I wish we could flip.
He would slay the dragon with a laser sword at the end. It was absolutely like going to Disneyland.
Greetings, my children. Come with me now and discover the magic that lies beyond the Sea of Dreams.
At that point, Ronnie had reinvented himself fully as being the caretaker of the name Dio.
1986 Sacred Heart Tour. I remember bumping into him on that tour. I'd never seen him so full of joy. I'd never seen him so fulfilled. He knew, I think, that he'd done something remarkable with his career at this point, but it's taken Ronnie, you know what, nearly 40 years to get there. And Ronnie defeating the dragon becomes a kind of metaphor for the man. His whole life had been a battle. Everything Ronnie had, he had had to work for, fight for, earn. He's like Muhammad Ali, the guy that became world champion 3 times. And every time Ronnie slew that dragon, that was what heavy metal is all about. Authenticity. Here he is, top of the mountain, and he'd done it by not writing the hit single. He'd done it by not kowtowing. He stuck to his guns, come what may.
We've had about 5 offices, I think, and I've always had Holy Diver, which is very, very precious to me, the original artwork of a Holy Diver. I've always had that hanging above my desk. And of course, the gold records is just something you always hang in your office and things I'm proud of. You know, Ronnie didn't care. You know, in our house, we never had 1 gold record hanging, not one. He was a humble person. He thought that was showing off. So I showed off for him in my office. This is his first gold record that Ronnie ever got in 1975 for Love Is All, which is a song he performed on the Butterfly Ball. And then I found a scrapbook. I think his mum might have made it. Wow, it's all rainbow. Black Sabbath here. This is Black Sabbath now. A lot of press releases here. DIO. Those are fun days, real fun days. Yes, yes. It was a great time in our lives, a great time in our lives. That's the end of that book.
Now, the entertainment. Tonight, we got for you, you know him, you love him, he's a neighborhood boy, Ronnie James Dio and the Dioski Brothers!
At this point with Ronnie's career, you know, he'd been following his own path since he was a kid and reached a kind of new pinnacle with Dio.
We had a lot of fun on the first 2 records. By the time we were doing the Sacred Heart album, and it was a very dark record for us to make, it was really, really difficult.
All those fun times we had at Sound City, it was a great atmosphere. It wasn't such a business. Then the business end of this started getting really frustrating, and Viv was the one that would point it out after a while.
The promise was made to us that by the third album, it would be more of an equitable situation. And I was a squeaky wheel. I mean, the third album came and I was the one going, excuse me.
Vivian had just told me that he wanted more money. From Ronnie's perspective, when I bring it up to him, he looked at it as a young kid who he found and put on the map that was being ungrateful and pulling a leverage play.
Oh, you know, you should get paid for what you do. And when Sacred Heart came around, I said, what do you got, Viv? We've had 4 months off. Oh, nothing. Oh, really? Nope, not a thing. Oh, I guess I didn't pay you enough then, did I? Money is not what music is all about.
Ronnie had years and years and years of banging on the doors and Elf and Rainbow and everything else. And you can't just have somebody come in out the door and go, oh, yeah, well, I was as important as you. Band was called DIO for a reason.
He understands that whether he likes it or not, this time, I'm the Blackmore. I'm the Iommi. He's the boss.
After a while, Ronnie got tired of it and said, we're gonna get rid of it and get somebody else. I'm like, are you crazy?
Back in those days, losing a band member was a huge deal, especially a guy that was a budding guitar hero in Vivian Campbell.
Yes, it was magical, it was great in the beginning, but people have to go sometimes. You know, Vivian Campbell had to go. I mean, it was Ronnie's band.
You sometimes get very trapped by your own existence. You must maintain. When you get to a certain success plateau, the only thing you can do is to either try to maintain it or reach above that.
When I got the call to join, you know, headlining 20,000-seat arenas every night, it was like, whew. And so back then, heavy metal was going strong.
And that was during the time that bands came to LA to find their fame and fortune, and they all got their hair ratted up to, you know, 10 feet and tons of makeup.
This is the reason I am a rock and roll drummer, see? Because girls like this hang out with guys like me! Can you believe it?
Motley Crue, Skid Row, we looked like girls. So, I mean, not just us, but, you know, all that look was huge.
And I'll always say it that the rock scene of the 80s, we were our own undoing. It became more important about their look and not the songs. Bands like Poison, Unskinny Bop Bop? Ronnie couldn't ride Unskinny Bop Bop if they put a gun to his head.
Dio, he was never a part of that hair metal thing. He wasn't thinking about getting laid and doing drugs and, you know, crap like that.
I mean, the music was rubbish, and they destroyed what the rest of us created.
Well, there's Sacred Heart, and what's the other one? Dream Evil, and I don't know. There was another one after that. I don't know. Sales, they started to go down, you know.
And MTV, that was built upon heavy metal music, suddenly went, oh, no more of that.
120 minutes. Right here, the second of tonight's 2 world premiere videos. It's from the Seattle band Nirvana. Here's the planet's first look at Smells Like Teen Spirit.
Basically, right after Nirvana had the first play of Teen Spirit, it changed everything. And it needed it, you know. The MTV toilet needed to be flushed, you know, and clean up and get something else in there, you know.
You're talking to a guy who worked in rock radio for decades. I literally saw the day the program director comes in and says, all of these CDs in a box, no more. Here's what we're playing now. There's a big misconception that the birth of Nirvana and all that took down the quote-unquote hair bands, and it certainly did. But it didn't discriminate to just that. It took down everything. Everybody got hit with that. I don't care if you were Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, whoever you were, across the board was one of the most harsh, abrupt things I have ever seen in my life. All of this goes away, and all of this is suddenly uncool. It was like that, cut and dry.
Dio went in the box.
Dio was in the box.
The 90s were the darkest period because he got dropped from Warner Brothers. Losing a record deal was devastating, absolutely devastating.
The music industry at that time, it was like, we don't care. We don't care about you anymore.
For someone like Ronnie, it did get a little awkward in the 90s. Nu metal and grunge became what the public face of metal was depicted as. Underground, death metal, grindcore, black metal got more intense. The point being is that stuff like Ronnie James Dio, people just kind of maybe said, we don't need any of that stuff, that's dinosaur shit.
Bands like Dio find it very difficult. It's only really alternate rock that seems to be getting most of the attention.
So would you say Dio is going towards from now on?
Where is it going? Well, God knows. I mean, that's a lot of that has to do with, you know, with its acceptance, really. It'll go as far as people allow us to go.
In the mid-90s, I remember he came over to London to do interviews to promote his latest album. I had to beg, borrow, and steal to try and get someone to interview Ronnie James Dio. I couldn't get anybody interested in interviewing him.
That was like a really down time for him. He didn't feel loved anymore.
I've noticed you change your topics as far as message, lyrics. How did that, where did it come from and where it's going?
Well, because it's a world that, you know, it's not a very happy place. It's a world we live in that's just really depressing. And it couldn't allow me to talk about dreams and everything's going to be wonderful and the world will be happy. Just, you know, work hard and your dreams will come true. Shit. I look at the world around me now and I see that that's pretty impossible to happen. So I couldn't in my conscience write about dreams and happiness.
I didn't really start going to his house until the 90s. I remember going and taking photos of him, and that's when everything was changing. He noticed it because he wasn't selling out arenas anymore.
I got here because I believed in the music I made and somebody liked it. So, hey, I got a nice house. You know, as I told you many times before, I don't give a damn about this house. What do I care about this? I could sleep on this table. I could sleep on the floor. It's not important. It's all about playing. It's all about playing for people. It's the only thing that matters to me. So through the hard times, love what you do.
He's one of those guys I don't think would ever retired. Because when you're an artist, and that's what you do forever, you know? Until you die.
You've got such a long career. You haven't had any breaks.
No, I haven't taken vacations. I wouldn't know what to do with myself. What am I going to do, lay on a beach? That's a waste of my life. Eating, sleeping, and vacations are a waste of my life. You only got so many years, you may as well get all you can out of it. Just grind it out, wring it out, go for it. Because I got a lot more to do yet.
Start with this one, title track of DOLP #2. This is called The Last in Line.
It was very much a different thing from the 80s.
For you, we especially do this one. It's called The Last in Line.
But he would go to the ends of the earth to play in front of people. And I'd be the one going, oh, Christ, I don't know, you should think about this, you know? He didn't care if 80 people showed up to a show or 80,000.
He never lost sight of the guy from Cortland, New York, who music was his salvation. He never lost sight of that.
Ronnie never, ever complained. You know, he never phoned it in. He couldn't do that. It was impossible.
The enthusiasm and the hunger and the conviction, it was unbreakable.
Hard rock was out of favor. MTV was gone. We got record deals on smaller labels.
Ronnie just continued to keep making records and keep creating, putting together some great bands. There were some great lineups, people that were in and out of Dio. They still did some great work during that time. Whether it sold anything or anybody acknowledged it, Ronnie just kept going.
Think about the miles that are on that voice. And I always felt maybe he would have sort of started to relax a little bit, but we did 4 whole albums, maybe 5 DVDs, and he would be here every minute of every day for every part of it.
Being in the studio with Ronnie, it was unfucking believable. He was on a level that some people never get to in their prime when they're 21.
He would sing with the band while they were cutting all day long, every time. I mean, I told him 100 times, I said, we can just use the vocal you just sang, you know, every time they go through it. If you know, you don't have to keep singing it. He said, no, I'm singing with the band. And I said, okay. He's such a remarkable person.
There's certain people out there, people with conviction, people who have it here. This is what I want to do, and I'm doing it. And that's all that should fucking matter, you know, forever.
I must tell you, I'm not going to go away. No matter what happens, I'm going to be here again to haunt you next year, too. Perhaps the year after that and the year after that. I love to do what I do very much. And as long as people will accept me for what I am, I'll still be back year after year after year doing this and hopefully getting better at it if I can.
There was always that hardcore faction of fans. They'd always be there, and he felt immensely grateful for that.
Dio's the best. I told him to say that.
If there was 200 people or one person, he'd treat them as if he's his long-lost friend. And sometimes we used to argue about that, because he'd be like talking to like 2 fans till about 3 in the morning. And we'd be going, come on, Ronnie, it's time to leave. We've got to get on the bus to the next gig. He's going, yeah, just a minute.
He had this remarkable way of remembering people and what they were about. You know, he'd see somebody, you know, 10 years later, and he'd go, oh, hi, Mary, how's your mother doing?
Hey, Larry, how you doing? How's your cousin Bill? And he would rattle all these names, and I'm going like...
He would say, hey, wait a minute. Your dad was sick last time I saw you. How's he doing? And, you know, the look on fans' faces would be like, he remembered that?
He fed off that energy, that direct connection with every single fan. You know they've got the records, they've got the dreams. That's living in the face of career death, if you like.
In the movie The Pick of Destiny, it's the origin story of my band, Tenacious D. We took some creative liberties, but it starts off at the beginning, you know, when I'm a kid, and my parents disapprove of my rocking.
You gotta praise the Lord when you're in my home.
And I pray to Ronnie James Dio to please show me the way. And then he, like, comes to life in the poster, and he delivers the advice.
Escape your father's clutches in this oppressive neighborhood. On a journey you must go to find the land of Hollywood.
A lot of people say it's the best part of the whole movie, which is awesome and a little bit sad because me and Kyle aren't even in it. It's Dio, Meatloaf, and a little kid that looks like me. We had to record all the songs before we started filming the movie.
Can you play it for me from the end of Go My Son and Rock into the softer bit?
So he came over to the studio, and he brought a microphone, still like attached to a stand, with a cord, and he was like, I brought my mic. And we're like, awesome, but you know, we're at John King's studio. He's a Dust brother. We got like the best mics in the world here. Let's try it on the Sennheiser 5000 first. And he's like, sure, whatever you want to do. And this sounds like I'm making this up, but dude laid down such a heavy vocal, it like was distorting. We were all listening like, holy fuck, turn down the levels. I did turn down the level. And so then he said, instead of, well, let's take out the Sennheiser 5000, bring in the Robotron 6000. This is, and it's like, you know, we went through like 3 different like state-of-the-art, cutting edge, bleeding edge microphones. And he was just like too big a voice for these fucking microphones. And he's like, I kind of told you guys, that's why I bring my own mic. And so they're like, oh yeah. And they plugged in his mic and it was like, ding. And it was like, it just sounded like Dio.
Now go, light, sun,
Yeah, I just can't believe this is really happening.
I just felt an obligation to thank him for, you know, gracing us with his gift of his singing and music ability and inspiration. It was deeply moving to me.
Holy diver, you've been out too long in the midnight sea. Oh, what sweet girl could I be?
Whatever happens, wherever you are, as a musician, you have to play through it. Let the music push through and play through and still stay strong.
The music industry, in music, everything has a season. People missed that kind of music again. I'll never forget it. I was married to a woman, she had 2 boys, and they had a ball because they were kicking my ass in Guitar Hero with Holy Diver. I was getting my ass kicked on Guitar Hero by these 2 9-year-olds on a DIO song, and I was in DIO, for fuck's sake, you know?
Suddenly, rock and heavy metal, people are starting to dig it. It's not a passing fad. It's something much deeper than that. And sure enough, within a few years, the whole classic rock market has matured, and it's the ones that really, really mean something to people that will always endure.
And we got a phone call from the record label. They're going to re-release the DIO years with Sabbath. And I don't know, out of the blue, Ronnie goes, well, maybe we should just write a couple of songs.
We worked on these songs to go onto the box set, and we really enjoyed it. We really enjoyed doing it.
When we got together, it was like old friends meeting again. Just, I don't know, it's just a certain vibe that you get that just feels right. And we said, well, let's get together, let's make another album and go on tours and get the band back together.
And they decided they were not going to call it Black Sabbath this time, they were going to call it Heaven and Hell.
All right, let's check this out, guys. Oh, for God's sakes, my eyes suck. Can you tell me which... God, I'm jittery from coffee.
Now to pretend and make up an ending somewhere far away.
Here's one thing that is true. I think that Ronnie James Dio's best ever song was his very last song, which is called Bible Black, off the Heaven and Hell record. How many artists can say that their last single was among the best? To me, it's the best. I love that song. Thank God I remember to say that on here, because it's totally true. You can put it on, thank me later.
What's this world I see? Who are you and who are me?
The fact that Ronnie got back together with Tony and Geezer and Vinny, I'd never known him quite so zen.
This was exactly the way it was supposed to be, just like the early days. It was just like Heaven and Hell again. And it was just so much fun. It was just, wow.
Everybody was absolutely kicking their ass and being friends. Everybody was having such an amazing time together.
And you could tell, even Iommi would smile occasionally.
It was really great, because we'd gone through a lot together over the years, and you get to appreciate things a lot. Sometimes you can't see it when you're involved in it, but later on you think, oh, wow, that was great, you know.
We'd sort of grown out of all our miserable days.
Life's too short now. You realize as you get older, you go, why carry a grudge or be unhappy?
We realise, you know, you don't get these kind of friendships, really good, strong friendships. They're so hard to get.
So this is a wonderful, wonderful time of all of our lives. Heaven and Hell has made a great difference in just my attitude as a human being now.
Heaven and Hell took off. It was killer.
Got a great reception. The album did really well.
Heaven and Hell embodied a time when the big, major, important heavy metal stars were authentic. They didn't learn it from the bands that came before. They didn't learn it from MTV. They invented it.
Heaven and Hell is an important band because they came along at a time when you need a kick in the ass. And here's this man, all these years later, still loving what he does to do as a legendary singer. That's remarkable, considering we go all the way back to the Red Caps.
It was like all the chickens were coming home to roost, And Heaven and Hell was as much about the culmination of his journey, his music, his universe, the love he gave out every night he walked on stage. It seemed to me that Heaven and Hell was the encompassment of all that good stuff.
It was awesome. I went to a couple of different shows. There he was in 20,000-seat arena again. It's like, ah, you're back home, man.
Thank you!
It was absolutely fantastic. Everybody was enjoying what we were doing. And I remember sitting with Ronnie and saying, you know, do you fancy doing another album? He said, yeah, I'll be up for that. But of course, we never did.
This is Damien with BlackSabbath.com here, backstage with Ronnie James Dio after performing the last show on the tour. Ronnie, sum up the tour for us. How was it?
It was tiring. It was every show was great as always. This band never is not great. It was very productive. We've been on the road for such a long time now. You know, the music made all the difference. The shows we did made all the difference, and that's why we do it. So I guess all in all, I'll give it a 9.5 out of 10.
And is that half point because of a little bit of sadness that now the tour is ending, or is this actually the beginning, the start of something new?
You always think, gee, maybe I'm going home. Oh, well, what am I going to do when I get home? Maybe we should have done more of that. Of course, there's always sadness for that, but we'll do more, and we'll probably do another album, and I'm sure we'll certainly do another tour. And for me, I know nothing else other than to play.
Yeah, it was on the last, we didn't know it was the last tour at the time, Heaven and Hell. Before he was going on stage, he'd be like doubled up some nights. Terrible pain in his stomach. We're going, come on, Ronnie, go and see a doctor. He was going, no, it'll pass, it'll pass. And he'd go on and as if nothing was going on when he got on stage. He was just the usual runner. He wouldn't let it interfere with him. And then he'd come off and he'd be doubled up in pain.
He'd had problems for about a year of indigestion, so he did a blood test. The doctor called me and he said, it's not good news. When we first found out that he had cancer, the two of us cried all night. My life fell apart then. Actually, Ronnie was comforting me that night when we both cried. He was comforting me because I was hysterically crying. I just couldn't think of life without Ronnie. You know, I mean, I just couldn't think of life without Ronnie at all. And he was comforting me, telling me, it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be okay.
Every time I tried to express concern and direct the conversation towards what he was dealing with and let him know that I loved him and I cared for him and I was there for him if I could do anything for him, a lot of the conversation was about him lifting me up and making me feel good. Where I was supposed to be doing that to him, as much as I tried, that kept coming back to me.
Ronnie lost the eyesight in one of his eyes. Also, his hand started shaking as well.
Did he lose his voice?
No, never lost his voice, no. No, that would have killed him.
A heavy metal music icon is in Houston, dealing with some serious health issues.
The staff are just so wonderful. They're just the best people on it, as you can see.
This is the Ronnie James Dio few people have ever seen. He's a bit soft-spoken. He's relaxed. Dio has stomach cancer.
You know, I've been poked and prodded in holes I didn't know I had before, and they probably made a few new ones that I don't even know where they are. I'm lucky that I am a very, hard person and strong within my beliefs.
Dio calls this experience something to roll with.
I refuse to be beaten in any way, shape, or form, so I'm going to beat this too. I just want to get better. I just want to be cured, you know.
They were trying a lot of experimental drugs on him. His eyesight came completely back. His hand stopped shaking.
Wendy Dio is always with him. The treatment seems to be working. She says the tumor in his stomach is getting smaller.
We used to call it killing the dragon. We used to skip down the halls going, we're killing the dragon, we're coming to kill the dragon.
And the Golden God goes to
Ronnie James Dio!
About the Golden Guards, I remember very much that, because that was the night that we thought, this is it. He's back on track.
It's great to be back amongst people again. It's been a little while since I've been able to do that, but feel pretty good. Can't wait to get back on the stage again. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I love everybody. Thanks a lot.
Dio, Dio, Dio. Yeah, they were chanting because I think that they also were being as positive as I was. It's all going to be over. It's all going to be a bad dream.
During Angry Machines, the first record I ever made with him, the record was done, and he came in and he said, I want to do one more song. And I thought, oh, really? You mean, I thought he meant, you know, bring the whole band in. And he said, oh, no, it's just going to be just me and some piano. And I thought, oh, okay, cool. And he just went out and sang that song, This Is Your Life. There are people in this world that are, there are people that make the world a better place.
Who cares what came before? We were only starlight. One day, then
And he was one of them.
because we're whispers in the wind.
He was in the hospital. Everybody left. I slept on the bed with him holding his hand. It was like 7:15 in the morning, and he just like shot up and looked at me. And I was calling the nurse. It's fine. What's happened? And then he died. It was like almost like he said goodbye.
This is your life. This is your time. What if the flame won't last forever? This is...
Ronnie and I had a mutual friend that called me, and I heard him in tears, and he just said to me, he's gone. And, sorry, because it's still... Ronnie was that special, man. All these years later, it can still hit you.
He was the heart and soul of so many things, so much music. You don't always see that while it's happening because you feel like there's gonna be more. When Ronnie died, there wasn't more. There's not more Ronnies out there.
He was the real deal. That's who he was, is. To me, it's all about is. Ronnie still is. In my head, in my ears, you know, in my heart.
Most importantly, the music is what lets us know that Ronnie is alive and living with us. Ronnie's beautiful messages in his songs, you know, they're lifting people, they're helping people get through their own challenges. These are the beautiful elements of Ronnie that will live forever. That's why he's everlasting.
That's one of the things he once said to me. He said, the important thing, he said, isn't just what you do and what you learn. He said, you've got to pass it on. Then you've lived a life worth living. I know he passed his message on to millions of us. The message is, if you do put your heart and soul into something, no one can take that away from you. If you really have something to say, if you have that love in your heart, that really is the most important thing.
There's a quote that I live by that Ronnie definitely nailed. It's from Horace Mann, the educator. He said, "Be ashamed to die until you've won some victory for mankind." Ronnie ought not be ashamed.
This is your life. This is your time. Look at your world. This is your life.
I still talk to him, but it's not like talking to him, you know. I miss him. The fans are still there. I'm sure Ronnie would love to know that. He would love to know that his memory is still there. He's not forgotten. He'll never be forgotten. I will never allow him to be forgotten as long as I live. I believe in reincarnation. I think you have to be the ultimate being before you get to that point. You have to keep coming back till you get it right. I think Ronnie got it right. I really think he got it right.